Hello to everybody out there. You probably know by now, but just in case you don't, this is Rabbi Pinchas Landis, Partners in Torah of Cleveland, Zoomcast.com. And that is Rabbi Spero's harp. You know, Rabbi Spero, I just discovered this might be a new Zoom feature, but if I'm talking, I can't hear your harp play, or you talk, by the way. I think they fixed Zoom.
Really?
Yeah, at least I couldn't hear the harp. Just until I stopped talking, I could not hear the harp. So, do you want to
I have no clue how to play it. I can't figure out how to play it. I still don't even know if it's a harp or a lyre. But I'll tell you one thing, it is soothing. It soothes me.
So you can now understand how the harp or lyre helped to take care of Shaul HaMelech's melancholy, which I love that word, by the way.
I mean, 100%.
Yeah, I love that word, melancholy. It's one of the greatest, just one of those great words that's not used often enough. I'm going to start using it, like, just even when it doesn't make sense, like just walk down the street and say, hey, melancholy.
It's a very soothing sound. It's a great sound. I read an article about I want to learn how to play it, and it said it's combined with is one of the most easiest and hardest instruments. It said to play it like a few strings and be soothing is very simple, but to know how to play songs is very hard. So I'll probably be on this level forever.
Got it. Well, you know what they say, Rabbi Spero, to become an expert at anything, it just takes 10,000 hours of work.
Malcolm Gladwell, yeah, I don't have 10,000 hours to give to this harp.
Speaking about Malcolm Gladwell, who I'm not a huge fan of his, but there are certain ideas that he's put out there and certain books he's put out there that I did like. And the idea of 10,000 hours, I believe, was in this particular book. It's kind of a chiddush to me in my head that I never thought of this before in my class this past week. Give me an English name for the Jewish people. I don't mean Jewish or Israel. That's just transliteration into English. I want an English name for the Jewish people.
It's very hard to think of an English name.
Think Malcolm Gladwell.
What do you mean?
Outliers.
Oh, they're outliers. I hear you say that's a good
name. Because what's our first name was Ivrim. We were Avram Ivri was the first identifying factor.
It's a good name. It's actually a good name.
I think it's great, right? I'm going to start referring to us. How do you say Jewish in English? How do you say Jews in English? Outliers.
I was reading, he has a book called Blink, a very famous book about a person's first instinct is correct. And after that book came out, a lot of books came out totally disagreeing with the premise. But it is an interesting premise. It brings a bunch of proofs in the book. So I was just reading about Chaim Tzanzer, the great Tzanzer Rebbe, who was also, people don't realize this, besides being the Tzanzer Rebbe, he was considered to be, if not the Paisik Adar, one of the Paisik Adar. He was Divrei Chaim on mikvahs, for example.
Right.
He was till today when people build mikvahs, that's one of the main Shalosh Tshuva, say one of the main svarim used. So he has a whole piece about Muskal Rishon, your first instinctual answer, and he talks about how really Psak Halacha, a lot of it is Siyata D'Shmaya, and you have to go by your Muskal Rishon, which is somewhat similar, not exactly, but somewhat similar to the idea of blink. That your first instinctive answer. I mean, I don't think it's true. The other day I called up Shalom. I wanted to propose a very interesting chiddush in a certain halachic issue, actually an issue, certain mikvah, certain issues like that. And I felt it was a good svar to say in the Beis Medrash and a good svar to say in learning maybe. But someone was asking me halacha l'maisa, so I felt I couldn't say it on my own. I called up Shalom, and Shalom said, "Call me tomorrow." He said it's a great chiddush you're saying, and meaning he didn't go by Muskal Rishon. He really thought about it. I didn't reach him the next day. 2 days later, he thought a lot about it, and he told me we can go with it. But meaning, I think I don't know all these stories of Bissal Khan, and also he would spend hours and hours and hours upon things. I know Moshe even. Pharaoh Wine is a story. He asked Moshe a question, and it was about a kid who was a mamzer. Mm-hmm. And when Moshe said to him, I can't answer when it's not Negeah. Come back to me when he's of marriageable age. Pharaoh Wine said he spoke to Moshe pretty often.
Right.
Years and years later, you walked into Moshe's office like he had many times, and Moshe looked at it and said, "You hear about the Mamzer case, right? It's fine." He was like totally blown away.
Wow.
Maybe maybe that is a proof to Muskal Rishon. Maybe Ramesha held that I won't have the Siyata Shmaya until it's the Maisa. Now it was like, I think it was 15 years later, he walks into Ramesha's office. Ramesha looked up, like, you're about the mamzer? It's fine.
Wow.
Ramesha, I don't know.
Good story, yeah.
How do we hold about Muskal Rishon? I don't know. I know that one more thing I'll say about it, the Maggid of Shalom Shadran, the famous Maggid, he used to say that Hashem would put stories in his head. He said he used to prepare one or two stories, and then as the evening went on, he would think Hashem would put stories in his head as he would speak around the Maggid's table, right?
Yeah.
I saw him.
What's that? You saw him in person?
I saw him, and it was.
Wow.
I saw him, but my grandparents have an apartment in Rechavia. When I was in Mir, my first year in Mir, and as a younger man, I lived in their apartment. That's when I davened in the grocery every day. So that's when Avshalom Zalman was alive and Avshalom Shadran.
Wow, that's unbelievable. Brother-in-laws, shvaggers. Oh, speak about which, let's just show. This is my favorite picture. I forgot I have it here on the wall. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, it's that Erev Yom Kippur picture. Let's get a good. There we go. Yeah, that's what we figure. That picture has to be Erev Yom Kippur.
It's Erev Yom Kippur. Someone else told me it was like Shana Rabbah. I was always Shana, but then first of all, Shlomo Zalman didn't approve of photography and Cholamoid. I doubt it would be. It's Erev Yom Kippur. That guy Yarmish, the famous guy MD Yarmish, took all the pictures.
Yeah.
He wrote. I think it was him who wrote about the picture. No, not Yarmish. What's the guy's name in there? Shuki Lehrer. Shuki Lehrer said that picture was taken on Erev Yom Kippur. I know exactly.
It could have been Erev Rosh Hashanah too.
Right outside the grocery.
Yeah, that's a great. I love that picture.
Exactly where that spot is, but under the arch, right by the grocery.
Yeah.
Anyways, I remember walking when he had Subbas Torah. If Shlomo Zalman's minion had a minhag on Subbas Torah, they didn't send anybody out. So they would go through every single time, calling up Kohanim and Leviah. They'd go through the whole. And so I walked in the middle, I saw Shlomo Zalman, Shalom Shadran, and a Rav David Rosenthal, who was the Rav Shari Chesed.
Wow.
They're all Zakanim at that point. Yeah, I was like to see all three of them. I saw Shlomo Zalman also many, many times. I never spoke to him. By the time I was there, he was not so well. It wasn't so you couldn't really go over to him so much, but I saw him many times.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. It's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this idea of Muskal Rishon, and I'll just say two things that come to mind. First of all, one from Chris Voss, and one from Rav Ezra Neuberger, Lahavdil. So Chris Voss is the author of a book called Never Split the Difference. Excellent book. He's the former chief negotiator of the FBI.
You told me to read that, but I read that book.
Yeah, a great book. And he talks about this, about Muskal Rishon versus, he goes into the psychology of it, about how initial reactions is like the frontal lobes, and then, when you have time to tracht a minute, that's a different part of your brain, and how, the frontal lobes or whatever it is pure emotion. That's your emotional response. And then there's the other response. So there's that about the psychology, about your initial response is all emotion. But then when you think about it, that's all brain, which is interesting. If you think about that in Jewish sense, I've been very focused on the Yud Gimel Midos and the wonderful sefer you recommended to me from Moshe Spero. And he goes into this in depth. The whole concept of Ruach Nefesh Neshama versus Mayach Lev and Mayach Seichel. Lev is Mayach. So the brain is the neshama that relates to your neshama. The heart relates to your nefesh. That's your impulse, your emotion, and then the ruach is. I forget what he says ruach is as far as the part of your body, whatever it is.
Ruach is speech, yeah.
Yeah, but he didn't say speech. That's something I'll have to look it up later. I can't remember what he said, but again, but he basically says the same idea that your nefesh, your ruach, your nefesh and your lave and your heart. That's the emotion. That's what just happens, right? But the neshama, your soul, is in your brain. That's where there's process. Right, that's where this process and emunah is the idea of bringing the two together. That's what he says. But this is not like Chaim Sanzer. This is more, I think, like your experience with
the other way.
Yeah, the other. But again, not to ding on Chaim Sanzer. But anyways, I did. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go.
No. So I was I was gonna say Rosh Hashanah was nifter right before I went to Eretz Yisrael as a bacher, but I was already very into his stuff because I was already very close to Pesach Chron at that point. So even though I didn't, I only knew Rosh Hashanah and still really only know Rosh Hashanah through Pesach Chron's Torah, but I felt a very close kesher. That when I met Rishon Shurjan's son, one of his sons, I met at some point at a Vort in Eretz Yisrael, and I just went up to him. I said, I want to thank you. I want to thank the Rav. So like why? He's like, because I'm so built up by your father's Torah. He said, he's like, look, American Bacher, barely speaks Hebrew. Like, how are you built up on my father's Torah? I told him, I said, very close to Pesach Chron. I've been, Pesach. It's anyhow, but it was.
I finished. Like I mentioned, we finished in the Navi podcast. We're not up there yet online, but I finished already the Vir Mishayim. I'm up to Yeshaya. Yeshaya is a totally different type of way of doing it. But one of the psukim, Yeshaya gives Klal Yisrael the Musar. One of the Musar given is Hispainin that Klal Yisrael did not contemplate enough. And that's also against the Milchah Rishon. And in this week's parsha, the Meraglim are very heavily criticized because they went in right away and they never gave it a chance. They went in with a preconceived notion for all different reasons, as we may both speak about later today. But whatever the case is, that these are also all rayas against Milchah Rishon. I guess it would really depend. The Milchah Rishon would somewhat depend on a first instinct as opposed to passing like that immediately. I mean, I think a Paisa could do both. He could hear a shaila, he could hear a question, he'll have a Milchah Rishon. This is the way I'm leaning towards and think about it, but not formulate an answer until he started through it. I don't know if it's contradictory.
Yeah, and my Rebbe is the same way, like your Rebbe. When I call Rabbi Berger, Yossi Berger, sometimes it's a pretty quick answer. Like last time I called him, I was I think I even quoted here on the podcast. I was when the shuls were opening back up and the minyanim were starting up. I was a little torn on where I stood. But there's many times when we call him and he'll say, "Call me back tomorrow. Let me think about it." And it's funny because my wife has a little bit of a test when she not test, but an understanding when she calls him that usually if he says "call me back," especially if it's something that there's like an Inyani Gashmi, she says that she feels like there's a like this subtle, not Musar, but subtle lesson that she takes, and from the experience of asking him Shilas now for, actually today's our 19th anniversary. So for asking him Shilas for 19 years, that usually if it's like a Inyani Gashmi, he says "call me back." She's learned over years. She even say this to him. She'll say, like, Rebbe, that I hear from you. If I have to call you back, I probably shouldn't, do X, Y, and Z, or in this Inyani Gashmi. But anyways, it's she feels that sometimes he says call me back when he wants us to think about it. Right? That was her take on it. But be it as it may, it's I would just want to share just about today being my anniversary. Just a fascinating ha'ara that I had as I was doing Today in Jewish History last night. So I was putting it together. At this point, I'm pretty close to a Today in Jewish History siyum, meaning Lag BaOmer is the completion of our second year doing it, and we've done just about every day on the calendar. A few more we still have to hit that we've missed, but one of the ones we had not done was Chav Vav Sivan, because I was always so busy celebrating my anniversary. But there was a story that just hit me like a ton of bricks. Was that when I was Bacher in Eretz Yisrael, I was there for 2 years, and for the summer in between the 2 years I was there, my family came to visit me over Ben Azman, and we did a family trip. We went up north and south. We did everything. So we spent Shabbos in Tzfas, and Motzei Shabbos we went to Meron and to Amuka. And even though at that point I was maybe in the second year base medrash, I guess. And I said, okay, but I'm going to Amuka. What do you do at Amuka? You got dam for a shidduch. That's what you do at Amuka, right? It's the cave of Yonas ben Uziel, and there's the whole. Although I don't know the exact source for it, I couldn't find the exact source, but the whole.
There's no source for it.
Right? There's a minig Yisrael, we'll call it, a minig Yisrael Torah. That if you dive by the cave of Yonas ben Uziel and ask for and not again you're asking Hashem, you're not asking Yonas ben Uziel, but ask for for help in finding a shidduch, that within the year you'll meet your b'sher. So whatever. So even though it wasn't okay, but I knew I probably wasn't gonna be back at the cave of Yonas ben Uziel, when I'd be in the parsha. I was like, I'll dive in out in the right time. I should find my b'sher. Parshas Chaisar that year, I'm at a family's house, the Dubenskis in Yerushalayim, and the Dubinskis were big Machnes Orchim in those days. Now they've gotten older. They actually live in Sanz now. They moved up to Sanz in Netanya, and but they at that point they were tremendous Machnes Orchim in Yerushalayim, and Mrs. Dubinsky had cut her hand a week before, and sometimes when you cut your hand, you hit that like nerve, and you can't really messes up your hand. So she was very upset that she wasn't going to be able to cook or have orchim for Shabbos, have guests for Shabbos. And she happened to be my wife is very close to Mrs. Dubinsky, and she mentions this to my wife, and my wife says, "I'll come and help you cook." So my wife went and made the whole Shabbos, and they had 10 bachrim over, and my wife's sitting over there with they're not Chassidim like the Chassidim do in Eretz Yisrael, men and women on opposite sides of the planet. But after Shabbos, Mrs. Binsky said, Pinchas Lennis is a fine young man, and her husband speaks to me about if I'm anywhere close to dating. I said absolutely not, but when I am here, call Rabbi Friedman in Atlanta and you talk to him. So for the next 2 years, they periodically call Rabbi Friedman, and yada yada yada. Long story short, we ended up going out and getting married. And today is our 19th anniversary. But not only is it our 19th anniversary, it is the yard site of Yonos ben Uziel.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah. So now both of those don't really have sources. I could not find actual source that Chav Vav Sivan is the yard site of Yonos ben Uziel, but it's on all the yard site lists. So either someone made it up and got on all the lists, or
sorry, I mean most people think the whole Amuka thing is made up completely in the past. Now, the Amuka thing existed even when I was a bacher. Maybe you heard about it from some, maybe a little, but not really. It became popular in the last 25 years.
Right.
Some of these things are real, some are not real. But yeah, I do think if Klal Yisrael believes in it, it's a good thing to do. It's very similar to how I met Harambe, actually.
Really?
Very similar story, yeah. I don't want to get into it today. It's too
we've done Harambe a lot lately.
The wound is still too fresh for me to really. Anyway, happy anniversary. You should have many happy returns. 19 years, very beautiful.
19 years, yeah.
So let's 120.
Amen. So, but anyways, I want to ask you a shaila on this week's parsha. I think I might have asked it to you last year, and I don't think you gave me an answer. That's what I remember. I didn't go back and listen to the episode, but you mentioned it as a good shaila, and I don't think we got into it. But I happen to see the Ramban talks about it when I was being Mar B'Sedra this week. And so I want to pull my notes on it, so to speak. The question that I asked you was that we see in the whole situation after the Meraglim that Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moshe invokes the Yud Gimel Midos. Now, this is the first time he invokes the Yud Gimel Midos ever, because people sort of think that he invoked it at Chet Egel, but he didn't. Right? He was actually taught the Yud Gimel Midos at the time of. Right, he was taught it there, but he never invoked it. Now here in this week's parsha, he invokes it for the first time, right? But if you look at the actual Yud Gimel, the 13 Midos Rach, which I know you're an expert in, you have a beautiful cheat sheet for the Yom Noraim that you put together. If you look over there, there's obviously 13, hence why we call it Yud Gimel Midos Harachmim, right? But in Parsha Shlach, right, by the Meraglim, it's only the Vav Midos Harachmim. He only invokes 6 of them.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So again, if you stick with the Torah Shebeksav and Parshas Kisisa, there's nothing there that says you shorten or lengthen as needed. Rosh Hashanah, the Masechta Rosh Hashanah, where it's the only place in Shas I know where they really talk about it, doesn't say anything like that.
All right.
But he does. So Baruch Hashem, I was zochet to open up the Mikus Gedolos as you do when you have these type of questions. Look around. Sure enough, the Ramban asks this question. Ramban basically comes to explain why Moshe over here decided to only invoke 6 out of 13. And I don't want to go into the technicalities of it. I'll tell everyone they can take a look at the Ramban over there, and it is fascinating why he said this and not that. But on top of that, I'll leave this for food for thought because I'm guessing you haven't seen the Ramban today. But he explains why Moshe didn't use 5 of the 7 that he didn't use, and then doesn't mention the other 2 at all, right? He doesn't mention why Moshe doesn't double Hashem and why he didn't say Kale, right? The first 2, right? So it goes Hashem Rachum is how it starts in this week's parsha, and everything else the Ramban answers, but those 2. So anyways, food for thought just to think about over Shabbos. A fascinating Ramban over there, just in the subject matter.
That's a very good question. I don't know the answer. Good question.
Yeah. So that's
last year. It means I either looked it up and tried to figure out an answer and I forgot, or more likely B, I forgot about it. We finished the podcast and I never thought about it again. But it's a great question. Really great question.
Yeah.
This is a very tough parsha. This parsha in particular is what to me makes it so hard is one of the many things. The story of Kairach is really about one person. He got people to follow him.
Right.
He got disenfranchised people to follow him. And even though it says they're Rashi Sanhedris, Rashi brings that down from the Medrash Tanchuma, but nonetheless, it doesn't seem as shachirish to me. Here, it was 12 great people, 12 of the leaders of Klal Yisrael going out together. Even though it was one of the Rishonim, I can't remember who, who says they were leaders of Klal Yisrael. Rashi says they disagreed with them. He says, in fact, they were like Sarei Chamishim. He has a whole shtickle Torah. I'll tell you why I find that, why it's hard to understand. Number one, because Yeshua was amongst them. Yeshua ben Nun, who was a successor, and Kalev. Doesn't sound like they were only minor dignitaries. But whatever the case is, it's that 10 of these people independently would, right? They each to be a nasi, or they weren't the nasiim exactly, but to be a person chosen. They were obviously independent people, and to 10 people to come to that conclusion together is
mind-boggling.
Very hard to understand. I never fully grasped it. I know all the answers we give, that the Zayar says that they knew in their Torah, they lose power, all the little things, I'm aware of them, and they're obviously part of it, but it just, I don't know. I can never.
I'm with you. It's a very difficult part to understand. I mean, I don't struggle at all with the aftermath. The aftermath I get. I get as well as I get anything else. But I'm with you. Like how in the world do great people? Well, again, you can ask the same thing by the Chet Egel, and you can ask really the same thing by any issue in Chumash. You know, this is the door up until either this week's parsha or next week's parsha. It's a machlokas, but this is still the door dea.
Right, but the same. I mean, it's the fact that not that one of them went wrong. Because Korach went wrong also. Korach also in the seventh door dea. But it's the fact that it's seemingly all of them went so wrong together. And even they obviously knew before. It says that Moshe had an inkling. It's why he added on the Yud. And it says Kalev ben Yefuna realized. That's why he broke away in the middle of one of the only Makaris we have in Tanakh of going to daven by a kever. Right. It's not before it's the pasuk. It's in the Gemara in Saita. That Kalev ben Yefuna went to Maras Machpelah,
right?
But even still, I can't wrap my head around the fact that 10 Gedali Yisrael will do this. I'll tell you a murdered idea I just saw today from Melech Peterman. I mentioned.
Yeah. Actually, he was quoted in 613. Rabbi Friedner quoted him in his 613 talk.
So my wife joined his. I did it for her. Joined his WhatsApp group where they send out every day a little clip from him. Mamish phenomenal stuff. So he asked the question we spoke about last year, but I want to say a different answer a little bit. He said it with the story. He said, we were in our eyes like grasshoppers, so we were in their eyes. Right? So the Medrash says he actually overheard two of the giants speaking, and they said, look at these grasshoppers coming into our land. Who are they? Mm-hmm. And then the Medrash also says that Hashem had a taina on Klal Yisrael. The fact that you felt like grasshoppers, fine, but the fact that you said they see you like grasshoppers, why would you say that? Because Hashem says, what do you mean? Why would you say that? They overheard two of the giants saying, "You look at these grasshoppers again."
Well, one second. Who the Medrash says they overheard the giants?
That the two different. The Medrash says two things. It says, Hashem was upset at them for thinking that the Canaanim thought they were grasshoppers, but the Medrash also says that they heard the Canaanim say that. They heard these giants say that to each other. Look at these grasshoppers. So why is it strange to think that they heard them say it? So the Hashem has said the reason why the Hashem was upset at them because the reason why they thought they were like grasshoppers because that was how they perceived themselves. Melech Peterman said he was talking to a young man in Yerushalayim. He said a great story over. if you ever heard him, it's not only the stories, the way he says it. Because he smokes e-cig, which I feel a kinship with him. He smokes his e-cig and he says over his stories, and he's such a unbelievable yid and beautiful mensch. And he was saying that he talked to a young man, and the guy said he's feeling very down about himself, and he was feeling very bad. And one day, he said he felt in Kyle. No one ever listened to him when he said his opinion in learning. He said even in his building, no one said hi to him. Everyone ignored it. Even his family, he'd go home, and his family would be going on. And he was an accomplished person, but he felt bad about himself. So he said he went to buy a new hat. He hadn't got a new hat in a while. He went to buy a new hat in the store, and in the store, he decided, my old hat is such bad shape. Right? And Shabbos, you wear Shleimer, obviously he's a Shleimer. I wear a weekday. I'll leave my hat in the store. I'm never going to use it again. It's really, I make it look terrible. So he put on the new hat. He left the old hat in the store. He said, I told the guy I don't need the box. He went home. And the whole way home, he just felt different. I think then he went to Kyle in the afternoon, and he said he felt like the guys listened to him that day. He walked into the house at night. People were schmoozing with him. He felt better about himself. And he said, you know what? It's the hat. It's the hat. And then one of his friends or his wife, I forgot who it was. Someone else was saying to him, you look like you're more stolz today. So he said, it's the hat. And they said, you're wearing the exact same hat you wear every day. And he took his hat off, and he realized that, no, he made a mistake in the store. He left his new hat in the store, and he wore the old hat home. Right? He had to go back to the store to get his new hat. But he told it to Rav Malach. I said, you see? He said, it's not that people were ignoring you. He said, you felt like you yourself were a loser. And the Mela, you gave off that perception, and that was your inner perception of self, which is what he's saying here, really Dvarim Pshutim in psychology. But that's what Sfas Emes is saying. That Klal Yisrael, they went in, these 10 Meraglim went in as I hate to say that word, but as losers. They walked in with their heads down, and we're nobody, and we're zeros, and there's no, it's not good for us. They had all these, the medrash there, all like what they told themselves were real cheshbonos. Real, it won't be good for the rest of Klal Yisrael. But really, they didn't feel good enough for. If I cared, we learned from Megillus Rus, right? Greatness does not come from titles; it comes from internal reality. And here they thought, if we lose our title, we're not going to be great anymore, which is obviously not true. It doesn't make you great, your title. So it's how a person perceives himself. I thought that was such a great musar. I'll forward you the thing. You just have to watch the way he talks, the way he speaks.
Yeah, please send it to me. It sounds beautiful.
It's so geschmack.
That sounds very beautiful. But but again, tough parsha, tough to understand what's going on over there. But I did see, and we only have a few minutes left till we have to end today. But so I'll try and say a little bit of a tifa idea, but quickly. I came across a beautiful Sifsei Chaim La Shabbos, where he explains the whole concept that last week's Parshas Balosecha is where we have the Nunei Afuchim, we have the Sefer Bifnei Atzmo of Vehibin Saron of Inuchi Yomar, and a lot to say on that subject. I mean, that in and of itself is a fascinating subject. But Be'ez Mei, he comes to sort of explain the famous thing Rashi quotes. Everyone always quotes that, what's this doing here? Oh, it's out of place, and it's to separate Ben Pronos the Pronos because otherwise it'd be a chazaka. And so Sifsei Chaim, as usual, asks beautiful, simple, very important questions that I always just missed, no matter how many times I've been marble the Sedra. And he says, number one, what difference does it make what's written in the Torah? They happen next to each other. He said,
right.
He said, number two, the first of the Peronios, which was Tino Brech Sefer, that when we left Har Sinai, we were worried that maybe we're going to get another mitzvah, and so we ran away. He said that's there's no Maisa Avera there. That was a machshava that we learn out of one word. It's drush on one word in the Chumash. That's what it is. So he's like, what's going on over here? So bottom line is, and we don't have too much time to get into it, but it's this point exactly. He says that the issue was, it was a mindfulness issue. It was a way that Klal Yisrael was thinking about things. And that was the trend, the progression from that point on. They were like a child running from school, not wanting to get any more mitzvahs. That showed how they felt about mitzvahs, how they felt about the relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. That was revealing of their emotions. And every other issue, whether it's the misonanim, the complainers, and by the shlav, they asked for by the slav, they asked for the meat, and even though they had mun to eat, the whole thing, and then eventually down to the meraglim. So that's all an outgrowth of that. It was an outgrowth of Yehiv b'neim kechagavim. That's not what he didn't shtill to the pasuk, but again, that's what he's saying. It was the mindful.
But it's a beautiful thought. I just want to add one thing to it. Is the mitzvah of tzitzis is very interesting because really the mitzvah of tzitzis is a mitzvah kiyumis. Mm-hmm. You're not obligated to wear tzitzis. You're only obligated to wear tzitzis if you have four corners on your clothing. Right. And today there's no such clothing made. Well, I shouldn't say that. I see you walk around very often in a poncho. So your poncho, I meant to tell you should wear tzitzis on it. Yeah. You probably should not be wearing a poncho. That's a separate discussion. But most clothing today doesn't have four corners.
Right.
So what do? We wear a specific beged that has four corners on it. And the Gemara Menachos speaks about it, and the Rambam talks about it, that a person should make themselves be obligated. And maybe it fits in beautifully with what you're saying, that because of the whole, the first domino that started the whole process was that Klal Yisrael was worried about more mitzvahs. And maybe the way to rectify that, and this was all an outgrowth of that, the complaining, the meraglim, this is all an outgrowth of worry about too many mitzvahs. So maybe the antidote to that is tzitzis, where a person in general is not obligated, but he makes himself obligated to show that he appreciates mitzvahs, and that gives him a whole new perspective on how to view mitzvahs.
And punt, what do we see right after the meraglim in the Torah? Tzitzis, right? Parshas Tzitzis.
Right.
Along those lines, a friend of mine, Aiden Goldman, who you might have been in Mechina with in Eretz Yisrael. So I think he's about your age. But anyhow, so he once...
I'm 71.
He once pointed out a beautiful, sort of along these lines, that what is the Aramaic word? What is the Targum word for tzitzis in this week's parsha?
Ruspedaya.
Right, and where else does that word, or really it appears as a name? Where else does it appear?
This I heard from you a few years ago.
Oh, I told you this. Yeah,
I know the word of Ruspedaya. I never would have put together this.
I get neither word. Right, neither would I have, but he did. But my friend Aiden Goldman, who's a tremendous Talmid Chacham, he did, and Rav Kruz Bedoy. He's not mentioned anywhere in Shas except for one place, as far as I know. It's the holiday of Shlosh Sfarim, the 3 books by Rosh Hashanah. That's what he says. So very much connected. Again, very much connected.
I really wonder if that was his. You see sometimes people's names, like Rav Meir was Rabbi Narai, right? People have different names. I wonder if Kruz Bedoy was someone else. I've never seen a source of that. But
yeah.
By the way, he was in Mechila. Eden Golden was in Mechila. Yeah, great guy. There's a bunch of Sfarim, I know.
Huge Talmid Chacham. Huge Talmid Chacham. He's a real. I don't want to call him whatever. I mean, I'll call him. He's a real. When it comes to the Maharal, he's a real Yodea Maharal. I mean, if you ever have a cash on a Maharal, call Aiden Goldman. He's
You have it, but does he collect phone calls?
I'll find out for you. I'm not sure.
Because I'm always worried about long distance charges.
I hear you, man. I hear you.
I pay 10 cents a minute for long distance. I cannot afford to have him explain to me a long Maharal. It'll be 20 minutes. That's $2. It's not going to happen. So if you can just ask me to collect phone calls, and I'll call him.
Okay, I'll let you know. Okay, on that note, we'd just like to wish everyone a beautiful Shabbos, a beautiful week. Please continue to share this podcast with everybody. Go to Jewcast.com and share Jewcast.com with everybody. Leave us a positive review and subscribe if you're not subscribed. And in the meantime, a big old fat welcome to the guest.
Welcome to the guest.